Hey everyone, welcome to JP's Chalk Talks. Today I'm going to be talking to Nick Brosco. And Nick is a new contact I've made within the production community and industry in terms of some efforts I was working on with another contact that reached out to me about a project. Nick came in, and Nick has a great background in terms of production and editing as a writer, and kind of bringing another level of expertise. So we recorded a session today, and this is kind of an intro for our discussion. Love to hear your thoughts, share your comments, let us know, and if you want to get in touch with Nick, please put in the comments. We're going to provide his contact info. I think we're going to do some other sessions. Nick and I just talked about it in the video about editing, and what Nick's going to be talking about is the editing process. We've talked about live streaming and different varieties of different ways we can look at approaches, but one of the areas is content creation and distribution, right? From a production perspective, how do you edit? How do you look at what are the options out there? What is the software? What is the hardware? So Nick and I kind of dive into that for about 20 minutes or so. Share your thoughts. Where are you at? Give some input. And we're going to be doing another follow-up discussion. Nick's going to maybe do a sample kind of editing, and maybe that would be helpful for anybody who might be interested in that. But I think Nick would be a terrific person to reach out to you if you have a need for a project from a production and editing. He did some VR work. He's well-versed and has a great experience. So I think you'll enjoy the interview. Thank you. And here's the interview. Everybody, got Nick here. He is a great friend. Hey Nick, how you doing?
Great, how are you, John?
All right. So today in this Chalk Talk session, we're going to talk about editing and the process of editing, the production environment. We talk about technology and streaming, but one of the areas I talked about in some of my previous videos was talking about some of the editing process, right? Especially when we're talking about capturing the content, pulling it in, and then editing that process. Nick is well-versed and experienced in this area. So I'm going to kind of maybe flip the topic. Maybe, Nick, why don't you just go ahead and introduce yourself, talk about what your a little bit of your background and what you're currently up to, and then we can kind of jump into one of the topics that we were going to cover.
Sounds good. Yeah, John, thank you so much for having me on. So my name is Nick Brosco. I'm an independent writer, producer, and editor. I'm based out of Portland, Oregon. I have about 10 years of experience in the entertainment industry, writing, producing, and editing original content, short form content, documentary content, and promos. I most recently worked at NBC Universal for 6 years in their in-house creative marketing department, specifically under the Bravo network. So I was doing TV promos, social media content, promoting their shows, pitching concepts, directing, and editing there. And then last year, I left there to move to Portland from Los Angeles to start my own creative agency, which I'm in the process of setting up. So over the last year, I've had the pleasure to work on a broad spectrum of different creative projects on my own. Mm-hmm. And I continue to look forward to doing that into the future. And I also offer consulting services to help creative professionals improve their projects and to help businesses establish workflows within their organization.
That's fantastic. That's a lot. And to so everybody understands and know a little bit of background here, Nick and I actually did a project with Harvest Ministries where Nick was able to assist, and I'll try to put a link in the description for everybody to check it out, of kind of a VR experience, and where you took a GoPro Max camera, they captured the content. Nick took that, was able to produce a great little trailer video intro for the Rush of Hope project that Harvest, that I was involved with last month for a live production, and I'll have a separate video that I'll be posting here shortly about that. But Nick was very, very helpful. Nick and I got connected through another industry source. And so I really appreciated Nick's involvement in supporting Harvest, and he did some fantastic work. And so Nick, we've talked about, So with the changes in the new norm that we're at, you've obviously made a transition where you're at, and I'm making a transition where I am at in terms of where I was on staff at Harvest and moving into a more freelance webcast production, live streaming, content creation type delivery process from the technology, production side of things. I think one of the areas that's been somewhat challenging for some organizations, whether you're a broadcaster, I don't want to say challenging, but just the transition, if you will, of the process of, for those that aren't well versed and experienced, let's like a Harvest or in the VR project, or maybe another church, or it could be another content creator, where you're taking and editing content to be delivered on an online streaming platform, in what we call a simulated live type delivery process. And there's a bit of a process to look at that. I think one of the goals of this conversation with everybody is to, and Nick's going to kind of dive into this, is to talk about, what are the basics of editing, right? When we look at the software and hardware, so why don't I just let you share about, your perspective and where you can add a little bit more context and value in terms of the editing process, things we need to think about from software, what would be the hardware, and where you jump in.
Yeah, definitely. So I think, nowadays we have more options than ever when it comes to editing. It used to be you had to have a specialized machine that
Mm-hmm.
cost, 5 figures, 6 figures, that took up an entire room.
Mm-hmm.
Now you can pretty much edit on a basic laptop with software and no real proprietary hardware. And that's great, but there is definitely a flood in the marketplace of options. I will say on the software side, there are probably four applications that really dominate the marketplace when it comes to nonlinear editing.
Mm-hmm.
The first piece of software would be Avid. So Avid evolved actually from hardware technology and moved into software, and has been pretty much an industry standard for several decades. Industry referring to like entertainment industry, kind of more traditional Hollywood film and TV type stuff. Avid is still very much used in the industry to cut feature length films, documentaries, reality television, scripted television, things of that nature. And it's kind of like the gold standard, tried and true editing software. And I think that it's great for certain things, but it tends to be overkill just for like the individual user, or even for like a small organization. There is a pretty steep learning curve to it. However, Avid does also offer vast technical support, which makes it a really good option within sort of like an enterprise
Mm-hmm.
scenario. More recently, I would say within the last 5 years, what I've seen to be kind of a popular choice is Adobe Premiere. One, because of its value. It has pretty much all the same features you would find within Avid and then some. Also, because it is supported on both Mac and PC. So if you had multiple editors, one's working on a Mac, one's working on a PC, but both are using the same version of Premiere and both have the same media files, you can interchange projects that way. The same goes for Avid, but it's a little bit more difficult to do that. Certainly, the price point to Premiere is a lot more attractive, and now Adobe has bundled it within their creative suite of software. So you
Mm-hmm.
basically just pay one payment of like whatever it is, $20, $30 per month, and you get Premiere and Photoshop and Illustrator and everything else. Adobe After Effects is phenomenal for creating motion graphics, and all of those applications really work together very cohesively, which makes it another attractive selling point.
Mm-hmm.
You also have Apple's Final Cut Pro or Final Cut X, Final Cut Pro X, which came out around, I want to say, 2011. And it was a pretty dramatic update to what was previously just called Final Cut Pro. And it kind of divided the industry in some ways because uh, I've noticed that a lot of editors were using Final Cut Pro kind of pre 2011, but Final Cut Pro X brought on a major change to the software. And Apple kind of started pulling back their professional support for the software, and it didn't really offer as many features as Avid and Premiere at the time, and I believe still to this day, and just kind of my personal opinion. So it's not widely accepted I would say, within a range of editors. However, if you're just doing your own thing, creating your own projects, and it works for you, like I think it's a great piece of software, and it's certainly easier to use and a bit more user friendly than
Mhm.
like an Avid or Premiere. And then the last software option that we have that has kind of become, I don't want to say like an underdog, but kind of like within the last couple of years has really risen to power within the world of NLE software would be DaVinci Resolve.
Mhm.
So DaVinci Resolve was originally intended kind of more of as a finishing tool for like color correction and like really advanced color correction and things of that nature. But over the last several versions of the software, they kept adding in more features to make it like a full-fledged, feature-rich editing software. They added in audio mixing tools. They added in, effects and titles and things of that nature. So now DaVinci is a full-blown editing software. It's not just for finishing anymore. You can complete a project entirely in DaVinci without having to rely on like Avid or Adobe Premiere or Final
Mhm.
Cut. And better yet, they have a free version that they offer that has, I would say, probably like 75 to 80% of the features of the paid version. So really, they've dropped down the barrier to entry in needing to shell out for expensive software. If you have a computer that meets the minimum system requirements, you can just download the free version and like you're off to the races. You can just start editing. You can mix audio in it. So that makes it attractive in that sense. And not to mention, an incredibly feature rich set of advanced color correction tools, node based effects, things like that for doing compositing and visual effects and all of that sort of stuff.
No, I think you're right. And I think I just saw the presentation from the CEO of Blackmagic talking about the DaVinci Resolve product in combination with some of the announcements they're making in terms of their camera technology, switching, and being able to have a multicam support type option, editing component, and which seems to be picking up speed. So I think there's no doubt there's a lot of different options available to choose from. And to your point, absolutely, um, and obviously now especially from your side of your experience and the world that you're working in and in the production and in my view, I think we're also dealing with the aspect of all these different ways we're getting the content, whether we're capturing it in the field or with those in a local setup, or taking content that's been captured and then running it, pulling it into the editor, and then trying to build some kind of a program out of it, right? Where you have the intro and the main part of the event, and then the outro, and especially for online, where that becomes important in terms of how you grab the attention of your audience and be able to do those things. Do you see, are there, from your perspective, and I think you provide some value a lot of value in this perspective, is with those options in terms of the hardware, is there a common hardware platform? Obviously, iMac, and, we all use Macs or some form of that platform. In terms of the configuration that you see that provides the right level of starting point, you would think from a hardware technology, if you can answer. I know there's many ways you can spin that and do that, but I'm just, in terms of basics.
Sure thing. Yeah, I mean, in my personal experience, Mac tends to, or Apple tends to dominate, the video editing hardware
Mm-hmm.
marketplace. However, I think that there are, definitely, of course, PCs that meet the system requirements or that you could spec out to become a real video editing beast. Um, on the Mac side, which I'm more familiar with,
Mm-hmm.
any of the newer Mac computers that are for sale nowadays can edit video at a relatively basic level.
Mm-hmm.
However, video editing is one of like the most computer intensive things that you can do on your computer. It requires more CPU, memory, hard drive space, video card processing power than, photography, music production, anything. So I would always recommend that somebody get, if you're going to get a laptop, get at minimum a MacBook Pro.
Mm-hmm.
If you can, try to get the 15 inch because you're going to need the screen real estate and the more
Mm-hmm.
powerful video card.
Mm-hmm.
Try to get, an iMac at least if you can't afford like a Mac Pro tower. And whatever specs those computers would have, I would say to try to match with a PC. I can definitely tell you from like a hardware component level, what is really important for video editing. First and foremost, I would say CPU. You're going to have to do a process a lot called rendering, where basically as you're building out your sequence, you start adding effects and edits and things like that. And then at the very end, when you're done, and you need to create a file that you can, give out for distribution,
Mm-hmm.
you're going to have to do a process that's called a rendering. And so that is all mostly dependent on your CPU. So
Mm-hmm.
the faster your CPU is, the faster you can complete that process and get more work done. Memory is important as well, especially if you're going to be using multiple applications or an application like Adobe Premiere or After Effects, which will scale up with the amount of RAM or system memory that you have. You'll just have a smoother editing experience the more RAM that you have. I think when I got my trash can Mac Pro, it started with like 16 gigabytes of RAM, and I upgraded to 64. I was like, I wonder if I'll see a difference. I noticed a huge difference, like
Yeah.
instantly.
Yeah.
So that is important as well. I would say probably at least like 32 gigabytes of RAM, if you can, would be really great for editing and motion graphics. But also GPU or video card, graphics card, is now becoming really important in terms of video editing because developers are building the software to now take some of the stress off of the CPU and the RAM and put it onto the GPU
Mm-hmm.
for playback and for processing certain effects and things like that. So to have a machine like a Mac Pro that has dual graphics cards, or to go for a larger MacBook Pro that has
Mm-hmm.
its own dedicated graphics card versus maybe the regular MacBook, which some people don't know doesn't actually have a graphics card. It has like what's called integrated graphics.
Right.
That can actually cause issues with certain editing software, and sometimes the software won't even be compatible. So prioritizing good graphics card would also help, and then hard drive space and also hard drive performance. So video files gobble up a lot of space, especially depending on what compression codec you use. But there's a codec called Apple ProRes that has become an industry standard for QuickTime files. And for 1080p, it can be as much as like a gigabyte per minute.
Mm-hmm.
For ProRes 422HQ is like roughly around there. I don't have like the bitrate in front of me, but it can take up a lot of space. When I worked on this project that was episodic show called Adventure Calls, it was a 22-minute finished episode, but the footage that they would shoot for that at 5K resolution would be into the terabytes. It would be about 4 to 6 terabytes per
Yeah.
episode. So you're going to need a lot of space, but also think about the interface that you're using. You really need fast storage as well. So whether that means, getting a Thunderbolt drive versus a USB 3 drive, ideally having some sort of RAID situation where you can have multiple drives striped together for speed. Luckily now we're seeing a slew of affordable external SSDs.
Mm-hmm.
You can get like a Samsung 1 terabyte SSD that's USB-C, or USB 3.0 for about $170 now, or the 2 terabyte for I think around $300. Those are way faster than like any hard drive right now.
No, I
So
think that's pretty. Yeah, which the cost, the democratization, as we put it, or the ability, the scale, the economics, right at scale. I mean, it's the cost has come significantly down in terms of on the storage side, in terms of the acquisition to be able to get some of these, like you said, the Samsung or one of the other external SanDisk units, right? That's more out in the field, and I want to quickly grab my 2 terabyte drive and I'm putting it on the camera, or I'm doing some other activities, right? Or taking the Samsung and going off the A10 mini switcher from Blackmagic, or one of their new Pro ISO unit, right? Where you can grab the individual ISO files as you're capturing. So no, continue on. I apologize. I think you're absolutely right. I mean, it's like I think people sometimes get concerned about the cost and the entry point, but it's like, what I try to explain is like it's not as significant as you think it is. Now, if you want an array unit and you want to have a promised technology and you want to do those things, then okay, then the cost is going to go up a little bit, depending on what you're trying to do from an on-site type NAS or network attached storage type device. But from a direct attached storage, or just having an SSD drive that you can piggyback off the switcher, or some way of capturing the content and then loading that up into the video editing software. Yeah, absolutely. I think you bring up some really, really good points on that.
Yeah, and like you mentioned, I mean, it's going back to what we were saying, where it's like it's never been a better time, to have access to, we have like a plethora of software, and we have hardware that is just like getting cheaper by the day. I feel like 5 years ago, a 2 terabyte hard drive was like $300 for like a little portable spinning hard drive, and now you can get a 2 terabyte SSD for that. That's like however many times faster. But also, you have to think about what your needs are realistically for your workflow. If you're going to be doing a live stream with 3 cameras that you want to then pull in for an edit later, and you're going to maybe take the line cut from that live stream, and then you're going to take the ISOs from each camera. That's maybe 4 individual files. And if you're recording those files at Apple ProRes, for like an hour, they're going to be like 40, 50 gigabytes each. Multiplied by 4, that's 200 gigabytes, and you haven't even started editing anything. So you're going to want to think about that. Also, if you're going to be recreating sort of a live switching environment in the edit, we call that like a multi-camera edit. You can do that where you could pull in each individual camera angle and sync them together, and then edit almost as if you're editing live, but you're just doing it in an editing environment. To be able to play back those 3 files at the same time is going to require, a computer that is capable of doing that, that has enough RAM. Is your storage fast enough to do that? That sort of thing. So these are the things that you need to be thinking of. It's like, okay, maybe if you just like shot a video on a DSLR and you edited a 2-minute video on your MacBook and it was fine, it doesn't necessarily mean that's going to translate for an hour-long, multi-camera edit.
Right. I think that's what people, and it's kind of transitioning from what you're capturing in terms of the raw content, and then, ingesting it into the editing software, right, that you've done plenty of times, and I've done on my own part, and that was one of the big, decisions, is that, one of the things about that, and then creating a program, whether it's 30 minutes or an hour long, or trimming it, and editing that, and especially with different camera shots, or B-roll material you might have captured, to take care of some different perspectives that you want to add in there as part of some of the creative elements for the end product. And then there's the whole encoding and exporting process that you correct, so hit on the right on the nail, and that is people understanding, like, okay, once I've done this and I've created a 1080p file, and I've set the CBR constant bit rate, and then having that set at 8, or let's say 5 megs or 10 megs, and then taking that and then exporting it, and then that there's another process that happens from, like you said, from the live streaming, right? Because we're taking that content that we create and develop, and now with the online activity and the things that we're working on, now that incorporates another element that we have to handle from a transcoding and type delivery process. Another process happens to provide in making that available, whether it's VOD in terms of video on demand and then watching the archive, or some kind of simulated like live experience. So no, that's fantastic. I think we've scratched the surface, Nick. We've kind of just hit it at the ground level. and I so appreciate your time. I know you've got a lot going on. So folks, here's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna put a link in the description when this gets edited and I work on this and post this on the channel to link back to Nick, his website, give you some contact. We can contact, and then give some other information on that one. Nick, I'd love to have you back because I think we've kind of hit on the nail. I think it'd actually be great just for you to do a demo and kind of walk through some steps and let you just kind of own the stage a bit and showcase, because I think a lot of people would appreciate that and value your expertise, even take advantage of it, right? Even bring you in. So folks, Nick's available. I'm available from a live streaming perspective, but if you have a certain need, Nick's there. He did a fantastic job on the Harvest event, and I was so pleased by that. So Nick, thank you for your time. Stay warm because I know you're in the chilly Northwest area, and coffee, tea, something to keep you warm as the days grow a little bit colder here out on the outside. But thank you, and look forward to having you back again soon.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me, John. And I look forward to a follow-up. Maybe we can do a little live kind of edit along with me demonstration. I'd love to dive more into my process.
That'd be great. All right. Thanks, everybody. Have a terrific day. Stay safe and stay well.